Good morning, everybody. My name's John Stewart from Pest. I'm one of the technical training managers for the UK, and today I'm going to talk to you about ants. So hopefully you'll pick up a couple of pointers. Every day's a learning experience, and I'll talk to you about the infestation of ants I've got in the house at the moment. Nothing like bringing your work home with you. Okay, so ants are social insects, and there's different types of social behaviours with insects. But for ants, they're eusocial, so they live in large colonies, and there's four kind of characteristics that manifest that make them social insects. They live in groups. The adults live in groups. They've got different caste systems. They do different jobs. There's a division of labour, so they will look after the reproductives, and they will also. Second, I'm having a bit of technical difficulty here. That's better. Sorry, that was in the way of my slide. Yeah, there's a division of labour. There's a caste system involving sterile and non-sterile reproductive individuals, and they will help each other and assist each other for the sake of the colony. There's cooperation among colony members as well, tending to the young. So, for instance, they'll move larvae around or puparium. They'll bring food into the nest. They'll care for them and tend to them, make sure that there's no predators there that are going to consume them. And generally within the colonies as well, there's overlapping generations as well, contributing to the function of the entire colony. So, ants, I said before, are classed as eusocial insects. They have either one or multiple queens, depending on the species. Queens are basically just egg-laying machines. After they've mated, they will keep laying eggs and reproducing for the good of the colony. She obviously requires workers to go out and find food and fend off predators. Some species can live for a very long time. It could be 10 years or more, so that will produce quite a lot of offspring. And the queens are determined by the nourishment and the quality and quantity of food that's been given to them by the workers, provided the sterile workers. So that has a massive influence on whether the females will become a queen or whether they'll become a male worker, because they will actually pass on hormones and various other products in the food that they're regurgitating. So once a queen's fertilized, she'll have enough sperm to continue laying eggs throughout the duration of her life, said that. And the spermatozoa is stored in a spermatheca, and it's nourished to keep the sperm functional. So she has glands in there, which enables the sperm to last throughout the entire length of her lifespan, which said could be several years. It could be 10, could be 15 years. So you can see here, there's the ant lifespan of several species. Obviously, the most common one that we have in the UK is the black garden ant. So workers, they'll last for up to 14 years, not the ones that were in my house this morning. They're now dead. And the ant queen will last for 15 years plus, so it's quite a considerable period of time. A lot of the other ants, some of the ants that are present here, we don't have in the UK commonly. Some of them can be imported in, and things like tropical plants or produce that's been brought in from abroad. That's why they're included there. We do have Argentine ants turn up every now and again, and Pharaoh's ants. So they're quite common in the UK. You can see that the Pharaoh's ant tends to the queen only lasts for 12 months. So within the colony, each of the ants have a role to play. I said that before. And ant drones, which are males, the eggs are actually unfertilized for the males. They're haploid. They only have half the genetic complement. They emerge, and then they will swarm with alates. Once they've mated, they have no other function within the nest, and they'll die. And the new queen, she will go off and form a new colony. Worker ants, lifespan 2 months to 7 years, dependent on species. They make up most of the colony, which makes sense really, because those are the ones that are responsible for going out and collecting food, rearing the young, and guarding the nest. So they have several roles within the actual nest as well. Again, dependent on species, you may have soldier ants present. They make up a small proportion of the colony, and they're responsible for protecting the nest against predators. If anybody's ever seen wood ants, if they're being attacked by a predatory mammal, they rear the rear end up and they can spray formic acid in the faces of the animal that's trying to dig the nest up. Reproductive alates, so these are virgin queens who leave the colony with a swarm of other, that's the males, all the females. You see this in the UK around about September time. You'll find that garden ants will all start to appear at the same time. They'll go on this prenuptial flight and then start to mate. So the streets are covered in ants at that point. You can see them climbing up fence posts and walls. That's generally when we get distressed customers phoning us, going, I've got flying ants all over my house. They think that they're different from your ordinary garden ant, but little do they know it's the same thing. Queen ant, said previously, 1 to 15 years they can survive, and she's basically the matriarch of the colony. She basically rules a roost. She'll keep laying eggs, and when that ceases, then the colony will cease to survive as well. So in terms of their diet, ants can have, dependent on species, will depend on what they'll feed on. So primarily, all ants will consume honeydew, that's spelled wrong. It's produced by aphids, scale bugs, and mealybugs. They will feed on this, they will tend to them and consume it. It's quite a good source of nutrition for them because they can transport it in their gaster back into the nest. Some ants will propagate fungus, so they will take things down into the actual nest to propagate fungi that they'll feed to the larvae. So they'll take organic material down and actually farm this fungus. Ants will get protein from dead lizards and dead rodents, dead birds, anything that's lying around, depending on species as well, whether they're protein feeders. They can take that back in and that will give them sustenance. Ants will also hunt for other insects and consume insect larvae as well. So some of them can be quite voracious, especially some of the imported species can cause quite dramatic damage to the ecosystem. Some ants will take grains and seeds that are collected and stockpile them within the galleries and utilize these. If they run out of grains and seeds, then they will switch to consuming protein. They'll eat their own larvae sometimes if they're running low on food. So dependent on the needs of the colony will depend on what they'll feed on. Ants are constantly invading each other as well. So they will visit other nests and the victor, because they're involved in these large battles for territory and for food, they will get to keep the spoils, i.e. consume eggs and the larvae and ants from other colonies. You can see here there's feeding preferences for some of the ants that we come across. Garden ants, they love sugar. They like protein as well, so they will kill other insects. The invasive garden ant, this is Lasius neglectus, which thought to have come from Asia Minor, and they thought that this has been imported into the country by accident. That's quite a voracious feeder and outcompetes our native species, the garden ant. Pharaoh's ants, they love protein. They like to feed on high protein food. Low levels of oils are taken, but moderate sugar as well. So dependent on the needs of the actual colony, they will switch from foodstuffs. I've actually witnessed Pharaoh's ants taking carbohydrate before. Argentine ants, high sugar content. Ghost ants are the same. There's a theme here apart from the Rogers ants that survive in drains. They will consume larvae of flies. They are exclusively protein feeders. This is basic ant anatomy. So whenever we're doing any sort of ant identification, it's important to understand which parts of the ant anatomy that's important. So we have a look at the gaster. This is the rear end. There we are. So this is the gaster here. And what we look at when we're identifying it is this rear end to see whether there's a sting present or not. We have a look at the waist, the petiole, to see whether there's one or two nodes present. And we have a look at the length of the scape, which is this part, and the number of segments on the antennae as well. Those are all important factors when trying to identify ants, and whether or not there's any spines present, and having a look at the actual teeth that are present on the mandibles as well. So these are things that we would use entomologists to try and identify what species is present. This is, again, what I was saying back there. We were having a look at the actual segments of the petioles, how many nodes there are. So whether it's 2, 1, or a hidden petiole. We have a look for the presence of a sting or an acidopore. This is an opening at the rear end, the anus, which has got a circle of hairs round about it. I think that's maybe to disperse the formic acid when it's sprayed out the rear end, and whether it has a ventral slit or not. These are generally the smelly ants, stinky ants, that they're called. Things like odorous house ant, ghost ant, and Argentine ants all emit a smell when they're crushed, and that's coming from this ventral slit at the rear end. And then we have a look at constriction as well of the abdomen to ascertain what species it is. There's other things that we look at as well. If anybody's interested, I do have an identification guide that you're welcome to. So in terms of feeding, said before what the preferences are, but one of the things that ants will do is they will carry food back into the nest again in their crop. So they have a gaster at the back, said here, and it actually extends halfway up the sort of thoracic segment here as well. And they can carry liquid foods back into the nest and then regurgitate this food back to the larvae, back to the queen, and back to other workers within the caste system. See, when ants are actually out scouting for food, they'll wander about looking for a food source, and when they do find it, they'll take the shortest route back to the nest site again in order to transfer it. And when they're doing this, they will lay down pheromone trails, and the more of the workers that they can recruit, the heavier that this pheromone trail becomes, which means it will muster more workers to collect the food if it's a suitable source. And they thought that this has evolved in order to prevent aggressive behaviour between each other. So it's a bit like sharing is caring. If they regurgitate a little bit of food to one of their nestmates, they'll cooperate with them and stop being aggressive. It could have also evolved from parental care. So they will feed each other and care for each other. So sharing within the colony means that it will survive. Also helps to maintain that sort of social connection between the entire colony as well, and facilitate organization. So that's another reason why trophallaxis is important to ants. And they said before that they will transfer a diverse array of different chemicals within the foodstuffs that they're regurgitating, because there's chemicals within the gut, things like immune-related proteins, hormones, and this is important for development. It will determine whether or not one will become a larvae will become a queen or a male, or stay as a sterile female. Trophallaxis is also seen in wasps, bees, and termites as well. With wasps, they are agile hunters. They'll fly around collecting insects and then chew them up and regurgitate them back to the offspring within the actual nest. So in terms of the most common ant that we come across in the UK is the black ant or garden ant, Lasius niger, and they're 3 to 5 millimeters in length. They prefer sugary substances, as I said before, but they will also actively hunt and kill other insects as well. Generally nest externally, so they're found in the ground, under paving slabs, under monoblocking, and round about tree roots and things like that. They will have well-defined foraging trails, so they will follow those pheromone trails to wherever there is food. In Scotland, we used to have a thing called Fruity Friday, where all the school kids would get portions of fruit on a Friday. You could guarantee on the Monday we'd be getting call-outs for garden ants within the classrooms, because the cleaners never cleaned the bins out properly and there was always residue there. They swarm annually, around about August, September time. Ants and plant parasites such as aphids, scaly bugs, mealbugs, and leaf hoppers, they have a mutualistic relationship as well, where they have an unwritten rule that the ants will protect them from predators, things like lacewings and ladybirds, in return for honeydew. So when the plant parasites are feeding on the plant, honeydew is expelled from the rear end, and the ants will collect this in their gaster, transfer it back into the nest, and then regurgitate it to the other members of the colony. Ants also keep the aphids clean and the plant clean, removing any of the excess honeydew and sugar that's there, because that will promote fungal growth, which isn't good for the plant or the aphid. You can see here that this is a queen with a fully formed set of wings and a worker. Once she's been impregnated, she'll rip her wings off, drop to ground, and then start to excavate some new tunnels. She'll then overwinter. She'll survive on her wing muscles alone until the next season, where she can start to lay eggs again. And these are puparium that are being carried around by workers that have probably been disturbed. This is, I don't know if this will work. No, video's not working. This is actually in my house this morning at the front door. There was ants that had managed to nest within the wall cavity. I've sprayed it with insecticide, and I had bait stations down as well. They ignored the bait stations. There were amateur ones that I bought. Obviously, they weren't very tasty, so they weren't visiting it. I managed to put some honey down. I tracked a whole load of them out to see where they were actually going. So I followed the trails back into the crack and crevice there, right at the door threshold, and then sprayed liquid insecticide into the crack. So it's about being patient, understanding where they're going. Don't know what they were feeding on because there's no food there. They were actually going around about my eldest son's shoes. He's 15. Why they'd want to go near his trainers, I don't know, but that's where they were going. But yeah, they were disappearing into this crack in the wall, and I sprayed them with insecticide and hopefully have taken care of the nest. Oh, it's working. There we go. You see them just disappearing into a tiny crack just between this sort of metal threshold, door threshold, and then into the skirting board. It's quite amazing when you watch them. You see them recruiting each other because of the source of food that's there. This was at 4 o'clock in the morning, by the way. And there's the ants trailing. The pheromone trails will be laid across the floor wall junctions. Ants like to follow these structural guidelines within the house to get to the source of food. And right at the entrance of the bait station, I placed some honey right at the lip to try and make it more attractive to the ants. That's them all taking the honey into their gaster and then transporting it back into the nest again for the queen. That one looks as if it's had too much sugar. It looks absolutely drunk out of its mind. So that one's been having a good time. That's enough of that. Yeah, you can see them following those structural guidelines, picking up the food and taking it back into the nest. This is a relatively, say, new visitor. It's been here for, I think, about 10 years now, maybe a little bit more. This is invasive garden ant, Lasius neglectus, and they're quite difficult to actually differentiate from the garden ant. So people could be actually treating these as garden ants and not realize that they're dealing with a super colony of ants. They can have massive nests over several hectares, so it can span over a vast area. So you could be getting call-outs back time and time again for garden ants that you haven't got under control. It could be this particular species of ant, so it's always worth having them ID'd. One of the key features is they tend to be a little bit smaller than the garden ant. They're only 3 millimeters as opposed to 3 to 5 millimeters for the garden ant. And when you look at the scape, this is this part here of the antennae. That's it under magnification. Lasius neglectus doesn't have any hairs on the scape. The mandibles are different as well. It's got 7 teeth on the mandibles, and the 2 that are closest to the head end are slightly larger. When you find these, there tends to be a lot more of them. So there's lots of them that are collecting foodstuffs. They get into electrical equipment. That's one of the things about this particular species, and can cause fire. So they can short circuit out different types of electrical equipment, things like electrical gates, or they've been found inside computer towers and things like that before as well. Pharaoh's ants, I've treated these in several locations throughout the UK. In Glasgow, I remember doing a block of flats. There was about 121 houses all infested with this species of the PCOs that had been there before. A different pest control company had sprayed it with Ficam-W, causing the nest to bud and fragment. You end up with these satellite colonies being formed, drives them further into the building as well. They're exclusively protein feeders, 1.5 to 2 millimeters in length, kind of orangey yellow in size, absolutely tiny. You have to look very hard to see them. They've preference for protein, so when there's other insects present within the block of flats, things like cockroaches or domestic beetles, you'll find piles of dead insects that have been chewed up and cut apart, and they will also drink the sort of liquid that's been leaking from dead cockroaches as well. They have multiple queens within the nests, so they're disturbed when somebody sprays insecticide. So householders will go and buy maybe a can of Raid, spray their work surfaces with these things crawling all over it, and that will cause them to move. Tilers as well, smashing tiles off walls when they're redoing a bathroom or a kitchen, that can cause them to move. They are very mobile. The Americans term these as tramp ants. They've got no fixed abode. They'll just find some niche where it's nice for them to nest, where the temperature's correct and there's an availability of food. They like to be near sources of water as well, so bathrooms and kitchens is where you normally find them. I found them chewing holes into bags of bread where they'd switch from protein to carbohydrate. Obviously, the whole colony was lacking in this particular element in their diet. You can see this headline here, there was a girl 15 who was rushed into hospital with septic shock after she'd been, they say, bitten. I probably think she may have been stung and she'd been scratching at it, and that caused her to have a septic shock. And then apartment buildings. So before, I've treated them, people do try and self-treat, and that just makes the matter worse. There was a chap he had diabetes and he was in a wheelchair, and they were climbing up the wheelchair and onto his legs and feeding from open wounds. And there's a real danger of getting wound infections from them because they'll crawl in and out of bins. They'll carry things like Staphylococcus, Streptococcus that they can spread onto wounds and cause wound infections. These, you don't come across them that often, but when you do, you've got to be quite careful. Again, they treat them very much the same way as you would treat Pharaoh's ants because they will bud. They're extremely small, 1.5 millimeters in size. And the reason why they're called ghost ants, because you can only really see the thorax and head of the ant unless you give them coloured gel bait, in which case their abdomens will start to turn the colour of the bait that they're consuming. We used to have a product called Pharaoh Kill. You could use it for ghost ants and Pharaoh's ants, and we used to blend liver from the butchers with boric acid, and it had blue coloration in it. You would put it into straws, cut it into sections of about 3 inches, and then stick it onto the wall with pieces of sellotape, and you would witness the ants coming and taking it back to the nest. You could mix it with other bait bases as well to try and control this species of ant. I said before about them having a slit pore. These are the smelly ants. So when they're crushed, they smell like rotten coconut, apparently. I've never had that from them, but they do smell. If you want to pre-bait, the best bait to actually use is strawberry fondant. They love Quality Street. Put that into a drinking straw. They'll come and they'll take it, and you'll actually muster quite a lot of the colony up to start taking it, and you can follow the trails back to where the nest is. That'll help you to position your baits better as well. You'll find them round about windowsills, collecting dead insects as well. This is an Argentine ant. Again, very small, 2.2 to 2.8 millimeters in size. They again emit this musty smell when crushed. They have this characteristic petiole here in between the thorax and the gaster at the back. They have multiple queens within the nest as well. They were probably originally brought into the UK with wood, timber that was brought from Brazil. They can nest within wall cavities and infest blocks of flats and office blocks and things like that. They lay pheromone trails down, feed on honeydew. That's 99% of their diet. There's one school of thought that if you were to put cedar mulch round about the building for your landscaping, cedar mulch actually helps to control them when they're nesting externally. This is a species of ant I've come across quite a few times from drains, within restaurants and within factories. I used to do a factory that produced collagen sausage skins, and they had a major infestation of these within their drainage systems. Check the fly units, EFKs, you'll find lots of them within the catch tray or stuck on glue boards as well. So it's worth having a look in them. And if you see them curled up, they look comma-shaped or C-shaped, but the characteristic identification is this huge node on the petiole. It's quite distinctive, and they have a stinger as well. They've been found in hospitals where they've been stinging patients also. Exclusively protein feeders, live within the drains, and they'll feed on filter flies and forward fly larvae. And we don't spray drains, we don't put any insecticide near it, so the best course of action is to actually have the drains cleaned. You can see that they've got very small eyes. They don't really rely on their sight that much because they're living in complete darkness within the drains. They can't differentiate between light and dark, hence why they'll fly towards the ILTs or EFK units on site. In terms of treatment, you can use non-chemical means. This is a relatively new product to the UK. This is solic. This is liquid clay. You have to shake it very well before applying it. You find the ant's nest, obviously for outdoor use or for use within a warehouse or something like that, where you've got them coming through cracks in the floor. You can pour this liquid down into the nest, and it will fill the galleries up and flood them with this liquid clay. It will set hard and drown and kill any of the ants that are within the nest, hopefully reaching down far enough to kill the queen. It's ideal for organic sites or sensitive areas. Let's say, for instance, you've got a call out to a nursery and the kids are playing outside. You don't really want to be spraying. You could utilize this. It's completely non-toxic. It also stabilizes driveways as well. Where you've got ants and they're under-tunneling the monoblocking or the slabs, you'll find that they'll become quite rocky after a while because all the sand's been excavated. Pour this down and it will help to stabilize it. Other ways of treating them? Well, we can basically exploit trophallaxis as a behaviour by putting baits down. Said before, they'll carry that back into the nest. The whole point is trying to kill the queen or queens. If we can do that, then we can eliminate the nest. So putting down gel baits with a dose, actually using a meter bait gun is very good. It means that you're not wasting chemical and you're also following the application rates that are given on the label instructions. This here is biopren. This is S-methoprene, the juvenile analog hormone. It's impregnated into silkworm puparium, which is proteinaceous, and you'll find that the Pharaoh ants will come. You cut the top off it here. The Pharaoh ants crawl on one side and then take the protein back into the nest, feeding the queen, the juveniles, keeping them, sterilizing the queen and preventing the juveniles from reaching adult stage. That's what I used in the block of flats as well. I've used this. It's got graduated markings on the side so you can see that they're actually taking it, but you can follow trails of these little grains everywhere that they've displaced from the bait station. Other means of control, you can use chemical applications. If you can find the voids where they're residing, you can put insecticidal dust into the cavities, or you can use an aerosol with a crack and crevice tip, get it into the nest site and try to eliminate it that way, as long as it's not ghost ants or Pharaoh's ants, because you don't want to spread that. So these ants that have multiple queens and will bud, don't be using that on them. So it's highly important that you get any ants identified if you're unsure about what species they are. Wettable powders are also very useful because of the formulation. The insecticide or the active ingredients impregnated onto a chalk carrier. Once it's been sprayed onto brickwork or onto stones, the water will evaporate and then you're left with this chalky residue. That means that the insecticide is on the surface, which means the insects can then pick it up on their body and control them. It's great for porous surfaces. I'd refrain from using it indoors, especially on carpets and on dark materials, because it will leave chalky stains or residue everywhere and you'll get complaints from your customers. I would be using that outside along areas where they're trailing, up the brickwork, up the sides of the house and along the paving, probably a few feet up and a few feet across, so that any ants that are crossing that threshold, it will kill them. Other ways to manage ants is to do some habitat modification. So having good levels of hygiene, cleaning up any sort of food residues as you go. Your kids, they end up with sweets everywhere. Ensure that food is stored in sealed containers. In food factories, get them to clean up any spillages straight away as well. Fix leaking pipes, sort moisture damage caused by poor ventilation. Earth to wood contact, where you've got maybe wooden structures that are in contact with the ground, that can be susceptible to ant infestation as well, because it creates this moist, damp environment. Overflowing gutters, so if you've got water running down the sides of the building, that will also promote ant infestation. Landscaping around the building and mulch, make sure that's well tended and looked after. Like I said before, cedar mulch can sometimes help to deter Argentine ants or even kill them. Stacked wood and bricks and stones and leaf litter around about the building, that will provide a breeding ground for other insects, things like Columbola, so your springtails, other small invertebrates that will be living within this leaf litter will provide a source of food for ants. So you want to have that removed and maintain a clean environment. In terms of mechanical methods, you want to try and caulk any sort of cracks and crevices within the building. So look at expansion joints. Look underneath the windowsills as well. I've had ants nesting within wall cavities in the windowsills where they've managed to get in there, and we've had to take the entire windowsill off to get access to the nest. Remove ornamental plants, which will promote feeding from hermipteran insects, things like scaly mealbugs, your aphids. Get rid of any plants that are promoting them, because that will encourage ants to nest in that area. Use residual insecticides to perform barriers. Drench nests under slabs. I've lifted slabs up and actually flooded the nest to control the actual problem at source. So I said before, if you can get to the nest, control that, kill the queen, then the job's done. You shouldn't be getting any sort of callbacks. Use bait along foraging trails when they're found. So put down some test bait, see where they're going, and then follow it back to the areas and place your bait along those lines. It's better if it's placed within a bait station, then it can be easily removed, and it means that companion animals and children can't get access to it as well. Use dust and aerosol formulations to get it into the wall voids as well. That's probably the best means. If you need to get access into it, drill holes sometimes. Ask permission first before you do that, and use a service finder to make sure there's no water pipes or no electrical cables in the wall void before you drill into it also. Thank you very much, everybody. And if you've got any questions, please fire away.
So, a lot of people asking for your ID guide, if possible, John. So if you could pop your email address in the chat, then we can try and get that over to people. It'd be a nice touch point for yourself as well, with everyone as well. So yeah, no questions from the audience. I have a question. It's not unfortunately technical. What's your favourite ant?
I like Pharaoh's ants. I think they're a real challenge. I think more so trying to get the buy-in from the tenants, especially when it's within buildings, trying to persuade them not to spray them is quite a difficult thing, because as soon as they see a pest, they want to control and kill it. And when you're trying to explain to them that they're going to do all the work for you, they're going to take the poison back to the nest and eliminate it, you just have to be patient. But yeah, it can be quite challenging.
Awesome. We do have, you have a question. What dust would you recommend? Species dependent.
Yeah, species dependent. Just any insecticidal dust that's labelled for ants. That's what I'd be using. Look at the different manufacturers' websites and see what they've got available. Yeah, permethrin dust. That's what I'd be using. Used to be Ficam. Used to use Ficam dust. That was great for control of ants, but obviously that's gone now. Yeah.
Yes, long are the days of bendiacarb. Unfortunately, we're not going to have the luxury of that anymore. And with regards to gel bait with Formidor being removed, what sort of active ingredients are you finding do you prefer like imidacloprid? Are you an indoxacarb fan? So do you have a preference
Yeah,
for that?
I like imidacloprid. I think that's a good product because it's quite slow acting. They can take it back into the nest and it has pretty good results. Yeah, fipronil going with Formidor. I actually did some trials in my garden with different baits. And for gardening, that was the favoured type of bait because I think because of the viscosity of it, it resembled honeydew because of the viscosity. So they could carry it back into the nest quite easily.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, no, it's nice to hear that people always have a preference for it as well. So you've had a question around using brown ants in buildings with woodwork and timber. Do you have any tips for controlling brown ants or Lasius brunus?
I haven't come across them.
No.
I haven't dealt with them. Not. Have you dealt with them yourself?
No, I've never had the pleasure of working with the brown ants. I know we are finding them more popularly now. I think they're another species that we've had underreported. So as part of the academic working relationship group, we are looking into actually how often is a black garden ant actually a black garden ant, and how often is it we just see an ant and we just go. But I think it's one of those, it shows that identification is key when we are controlling these to make sure we are using the right control methods and, increasing that professionalism as well in the industry.
I imagine with that species of ant, it's probably more to do with the building structure and dampness that's causing the wood to become attacked by fungus, which allows them to create galleries within it. So it's probably a combination of some insecticide and also habitat modification, like, for instance, improving ventilation and having a look at maybe the damp course and things like that as well.
Yeah, so we'd be looking at like dry rot and the dry rot fungus and stuff like that. Maybe, yeah, no, that's an interesting take there, isn't it? For any questions that will start flooding in, are we okay to get these emailed over to you and we can get responses emailed back out again?
Yep, certainly. Yeah.
Cool, appreciate it. Thank you for taking your time again, and thank you again to Pelsis for sponsoring and letting John come and talk to us about ants.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.